This week, I sit down with Tom Neustrom, and we talk fall crappies, cleaning your Livewell, walleye electronics, and keeping your bait alive. Welcome to this week's episode of Ask the Buzz, the show where you send us your fishing questions and we answer them. Now, I'm Nick Linder, and this week with me I have legendary guide Tom Neustrom.
Hey Nick, how you doing?
Very good.
Good to see you. Good.
Absolutely. So I went through some of your questions and picked out a few that I thought Tom would be able to give some really good insight on.
Terrific. Yeah.
So let's jump right in.
Go for it.
The first question is from Rob Johnson, and Rob asks, what is the most efficient way to locate and catch crappies during fall?
You know, Nick, everybody has a perspective on it because, it depends on what the depth in the lake is. If you've got 60, 80 feet, you're looking for different holes that are, 25 to 40 feet away from that real deep water. That's what, a lot of times I'll look for when I'm fishing those deep lakes. But, strategically, you need to drive around and use your electronics to find these fish. And most often they're suspended. You don't see too many of them on the bottom until you fish water that's, maybe the deepest part of those lakes are 14 to 22 feet. So they actually look and appear differently when they're shallower as opposed to the deep fish. But they can be anywhere in the water column. I've seen them down in 40 feet of water. I've seen them down 10, 20 feet. But those fish are really hard to catch. For some reason, they get spooked out and they're really tough to catch. But the ones say you're in 35, 40 feet and they're down 25 to 30 feet, those fish will bite. Usually you can catch those fish. What are they feeding on is the most important thing. And, even though sometimes we're catching them on a jig and wrap or a jig and minnow, they're really not feeding on that. They're feeding on grubs. It could be bloodworms. It could be a hatch from, that's going to happen in the spring, and there's grubs that come out of the mud. And that's why a lot of times I don't fish the fall crappies until it gets a little later in the morning, like 9, 10 o'clock is when I start to fish them. I don't go real early in the morning because they just don't seem to come off the bottom. So, those are two different things to look at. If you're going to fish them deep, you still always need to use your electronics. I use a Humminbird. I love my Helix 10. It really is very definitive on the fish for me. And if you're fishing shallower lakes, you want to look in that 14 to 18 feet of water if the maximum depth is 20 to 24 feet.
So basically you're running around different structure and kind of graphing until you see some fish, and then you're targeting them based on what depth you're finding them in.
Yeah, and usually it's not structure so much as it is a hole.
A hole,
and
okay.
You need soft bottom because that's what they're feeding on. They're feeding on a grub or a worm or something that's coming up off the bottom. So you're not really looking for structure. Now, there is times when if you got a sunken island, maybe the top's off at 10 feet, and then there might be another sunken island maybe 100 yards away, and there's a dip in between the two of them. A lot of times they'll go in those areas, those trench areas, and they'll set up on there. And it really depends on the lake. The other thing is too, look at your DNR stats and find out if the lake has got a good number of crappies. And I'll tell you what, it can help you in many, many ways to find lakes that have good crappie populations, and that can help you out too.
Great. It's good stuff. Well, let's jump into question number 2 here. Now, Tony Bray, he asks, he prefaces it, bait is not cheap. And he says, I throw my minnows away at the end of the day because they die in city water. What is the best way to keep bait fresh and alive legally in Minnesota?
I'd change cities to start with if the water's not good. I'm just kidding. Tony, the thing is, when you ask that question, it's great because as a guide, we have to actually do this every day that we're using live bait. What I like to do is I like to get water from the bait shop where I purchase the bait. I'll put it into 3-gallon containers or gallon containers, and I'll put it in a cooler in my truck. And then when I get done at the end of the day, instead of throwing my bait, I'll drain out the water. I'll put the well water that I have in the cooler into a bucket, usually an aerated bucket. I've got a Frable bucket that I use that has a good aeration system, and then we just change the water out, and that seems to work the best. So, you know, if your minnows are dying with city water, just remember when you buy your minnows from the bait shop, just ask them, hey, can I have some water? You know what, it's all well water, and they're really good with that. All the bait shop owners, you know, they will always help you with that and provide some water for you. So just put them in plastic jugs and put them in a cooler, and then change your water out when you're done fishing for the day, and then you'll have bait for tomorrow.
Great. Well, I think that about covers it. Let's jump into question number 3.
Okay.
And this one is from Ryan Wimmer. And Ryan asks, when locating walleyes during the fall months with electronics, which Humminbird electronic views do you use, and how much time do you need to determine if fish are in the area?
Well, it's interesting, you know, and you know, the problem with so many of us is we do fish memories. You know, we fish where we caught them a year ago, 5 years ago, conditions, the water temperature, the wind, everything, we do that. And that's not always the worst habit, but it's a habit that you don't want to get into all the time. So I go into areas where I think the walleyes are going to be, and I run a Helix, Humminbird Helix 10, and you know, I got 2D graph, and I split the screen with down imaging. So I go in the areas, and I can be specific. This last week when I was out fishing, we actually found some fish in about 22 feet of water, but they didn't look like a fish on the graph. They looked different. They were just a lump on the bottom. But then on the down imaging, they were just about maybe almost an inch to inch and a half off the bottom. But then you compare them over, and they were still a lump on a 2D graph. But then when you went to side or down imaging, it was actually up off the bottom. So I turned around and fished those fish, and we caught them. So paying attention to your electronics and looking at not only your graph but also down imaging can help you to find these fish when sometimes you don't even think they're there, but they're there, and it'll help you to be a better fisherman for one thing and catch fish under tough conditions. But you can identify these fish a lot better by using both of them. It's kind of a two-fisted attack.
Now that's it's interesting because that's one thing that I've heard from many different guides and pros and whatnot, and I think it's underutilized by most anglers, is actually not only using your sonar but your down imaging, because it gives you a different look, whether you're looking at fish on the bottom like Tom was talking about, or if you're fishing around weeds, you can pick out fish in there. So I think it's definitely a good, interesting tool.
Yeah. And you know, even with, you know, as we were previously talking about schools of crappies, they look completely different on down imaging as they do to the 2D graph. You know, they just have a different look to them, and you can actually pick out the numbers of fish. I mean, I've got, you know, pictures on my graph that of schools of crappies where I could actually tell you there was 50, 60 fish in that school because I can count the white, you know, the white marks on there, but you couldn't really do that with the graph. But, you know, I think it's real important, especially when you look at the graph and you see something on the bottom that's irregular, like if it's flat and then all of a sudden you see a lump and a lump and then another lump over here, go back over it, switch over to down imaging, and I'll tell you what, it'll make you a believer, because then you'll drop your line and whack one, and I'll tell you, it'll make you believe it.
All right, that's great stuff. I think we actually have time for one more question, so let's jump in here.
Fire away.
Now this one is from John Petrie, I think it's pronounced, and he asked, what is a good system or process for cleaning a live well to make sure that it is a good environment for your catch?
You know, I do this, Nick, I do this a couple times a year because, you know, I'm handling a lot of fish with customers and that. And sometimes my wife will give me the heads up and say, you know what, I think your live well needs cleaning. You know, it's just a little bit of a smell. But what I do is I take straight up vinegar and I put it on a foam pad or, you know, a mitt, and I just soak it with that vinegar, and I wipe it all through the live well. And I might even do it twice, but usually once, you know, is good. And then what I'll do is I'll fill the live well up twice with water completely, and then drain it out, and then the last time I'll spray it really well. I'll fill it up one more time, and then that's it. And I take all the smell out, the grit, the grime, and it's good to go. And it's user-friendly, it doesn't hurt the fish or bait, and as long as you rinse it out, don't think that you can just do the vinegar or not. So once you do that, you're good to go. And what's the cost? I mean, I don't know how much a bottle of vinegar is, but it's not very expensive. But it's a great way, and it's environmentally friendly. So I think that's the thing. Just remember that. It's a little tip that's it's worked for me for quite a while.
That's very good. You don't want to be the guy with the stinky live well.
No, you do not. People will tell you. Your friends who used to be your friends will say, hey, your live well stinks. But no, I think that's one of the reasons why we did that, and we continue to do it, and it works really well for us.
Well, that's cool. So before I let you go, where are you fishing this week?
Well, I'm kind of done right now. I got to get my boat winterized on Thursday, and the owner's coming to get it next week. But I might go fishing with a buddy tomorrow. I'm not sure yet. We're going to walleye fish up north of Grand Rapids, a couple smaller lakes. I haven't been doing real well on the big lakes lately, but the small lakes have been just awesome. So, and we've been catching some bonus big smallmouth too. So, and it's funny because we were using smaller minnows on a jig and minnow, and we went to 3 to 4 inch rainbow chubs, and that's been the ticket. But what you got to do is when they grab it, you got to let them hold it, because all of a sudden when the line goes sideways, almost like when you're getting a bass bite with a plastic worm, when that line goes sideways, then you want to whack them. But right now, those bigger chubs have been working real well for us.
Great stuff. Well, it's always a pleasure talking with Tom here, and hopefully you guys were able to learn a few things with our little chat here.
Oh yeah, love it. Thanks, Nick.
So,
really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. And before we head out, is there anywhere people can find out more about you?
Yeah, if you want to book something or even find me, give me a call at 218-259-2628, and that's my cell, and home is 218-327-2312. Or just look me up on my website at www.mnfishingconnections.com, and I'll get back to you ASAP.
Very good. Well, until next time, thanks for watching, and you guys keep on sending us questions, and we'll keep on answering them.